The phone trembled in Ethan's hand as he stared at the number glowing on his screen. 8 years of searching, of wondering, of regret, all leading to this moment. His corner office on the 42nd floor of downtown Boston's most prestigious building suddenly felt too small, too confined for the magnitude of what he was about to do. "Emma," he whispered, her name still as sweet on his lips as it had been when he was 18. Now at 26, Ethan had everything most people dreamed of: a thriving technology company, a penthouse overlooking the harbor, and more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes, yet none of it filled the void she'd left. His thumb hovered over the call button. Outside his floor-to-ceiling windows, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, reminiscent of those endless summer evenings they'd spent by Willow's Lake. The memory hit him like a physical blow, her infectious laughter echoing across the water, her dark curls catching the last rays of daylight, the way her deep brown eyes sparkled when she talked about their future. Emma had been the most beautiful girl in Rivertown, turning heads wherever she went, with her radiant ebony skin and confident stride. A future that had shattered the day his father stumbled home drunk and broken, announcing they'd lost everything. "Mr. Bennett," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The board members are waiting in the conference room." Ethan cleared his throat. "Reschedule." His voice carried the authority that had become his armor over the years. Something urgent came up. Before he could second-guess himself, he pressed the call button. Each ring felt like an eternity, his heart pounding against his ribs with such force he was sure it would leave bruises. Ring. Ring. "Hello?" A male voice answered, casual and comfortable, as if he belonged there, as if he had every right to be answering Emma's phone. Ethan's world tilted on its axis. His free hand gripped the edge of his desk, knuckles turning white. "Is Emma there?" The words felt like glass in his throat. "Oh yeah." The man chuckled. "She's in the bathroom." "Who's this?" The familiarity in the stranger's tone, the easy way he spoke about her whereabouts, it painted a picture Ethan couldn't bear to see. Of course she'd moved on. 8 years was a lifetime. What had he expected? That she'd been sitting around pining for the boy who disappeared without a word. "Wrong number," Ethan managed to say, his voice barely a whisper. "Sorry to bother you." He ended the call and dropped the phone on his desk as if it had burned him. The sunset had deepened to blood red, casting long shadows across his office. In the reflection of the windows, he barely recognized himself: the tailored suit, the carefully styled dark hair, the sharp jawline that graced the covers of business magazines. Success had transformed him from that scared teenage boy into someone his younger self wouldn't recognize. But underneath it all, he was still that same coward who'd run away. Ethan pressed his forehead against the cool glass, closing his eyes against the memories that threatened to overwhelm him. Their last day together played behind his eyelids like a cruel movie. Emma, in that yellow sundress that perfectly complemented her dark skin, her natural curls framing her face as she talked excitedly about college plans, while they shared a milkshake at Sally's diner. He'd known then that it would be their last moment together, but he couldn't bring himself to tell her, couldn't bear to see the light die in her eyes. The next morning before dawn, his family had packed what little they could fit in their old station wagon and driven away from Rivertown, leaving behind their home, their dignity, and his heart. "Coward," he muttered to his reflection. Even now, after building an empire from nothing, after proving everyone who doubted him wrong, he still couldn't face her. One phone call, one male voice, and he'd retreated like that scared 8-year-old boy. His phone buzzed. For a heart-stopping moment, he thought it might be her calling back, but it was just another email, another meeting request, another reminder of the life he'd built to try to fill the Emma-shaped hole in his existence. Ethan straightened his tie, a gesture that had become almost reflexive. He'd learned early in his rise to power that appearance was everything. Show no weakness. Keep moving forward. Never look back. But as he gathered his things to head home, his eyes caught on the small photograph he kept hidden in his desk drawer. It was worn at the edges, creased from being folded and unfolded countless times. In it, Emma's beautiful brown skin glowed in the summer sun as she laughed at something he'd said, her natural curls dancing in the breeze. They were just 2 teenagers then, their whole lives ahead of them. Unaware that their world was about to implode, he tucked the photo back into its hiding place. Tomorrow, he'd throw himself back into work. He'd continue building his empire, continue pretending that success could compensate for what he'd lost. But tonight, in the solitude of his penthouse, he'd allow himself to remember the girl whose smile could light up the darkest room, whose determination had inspired him to dream bigger than their small-town limitation. The girl who, according to his best investigators, still lived in Rivertown, the girl who'd stayed while he'd run, the girl who now shared her life with someone else, As his private elevator descended, Ethan made a promise to himself. No more searching, no more wondering. It was time to let go of the past and accept that some stories don't get happy endings. Some mistakes can't be undone. Some loves are meant to remain beautiful, memories preserved in the amber of youth and possibility. The doors opened to the private parking garage, and Ethan stepped out, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. His Ferrari waited in its reserved spot, another symbol of how far he'd come from that broken boy in a dying town. He climbed in, the leather seat embracing him like an old friend. But instead of starting the engine, he sat there in the darkness, remembering the last words Emma had said to him. "See you tomorrow, Ethan Bennett. Don't you dare be late." 8 years later, he was still running late, only now he'd missed his chance entirely. Little did Ethan know that fate had other plans. In just 3 weeks, a speaking engagement would bring him back to Rivertown, back to the scene of his greatest regret, back to Emma, and this time, running wouldn't be an option. Emma Foster stood at the window of her family's pharmacy, watching autumn leaves dance across Main Street. At 26, she'd grown into a woman who commanded respect in Rivertown, taking over Foster's family pharmacy after her father's passing 3 years ago. Her natural curls were pulled back in a neat bun, her white pharmacist's coat, crisp and professional, over a burgundy dress that complemented her dark skin. "Hey, Emma." Noah's voice carried from the back of the store. That order from Milwaukee finally showed up. She smiled, grateful for her childhood friend's constant presence. Noah had been there through everything: her father's illness, the struggle to keep the pharmacy running, and all those nights she'd spent crying over a boy who'd vanished like morning mist. The same boy whose voice she'd missed just last week when he'd called and hung up. "I'll check it in a minute," she called back, her fingers absently touching the delicate gold chain around her neck, the last birthday gift from her father. The bell above the door chimed, and Mrs. Peterson shuffled in, her cane tapping against the worn wooden floor. "Emma, sweetheart, tell me you've got my prescription ready." "Of course, Mrs. Peterson." Emma moved behind the counter, her movements graceful and assured. She'd practically grown up in this space, learning every corner of it while sitting on her father's shoulders. Now it was her legacy to protect. "How's that knee treating you?" "Oh, honey, it knows rain's coming before the weatherman does." The elderly woman leaned on the couch. "Just like your daddy used to say about his shoulder. Lord, I miss that man. He'd be so proud of you, keeping this place running smooth as silk." Emma's heart squeezed. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson." She retrieved the prescription from the organized shelves behind her. "Now remember, twice daily with food. You sound just like him." Mrs. Peterson's eyes grew misty. "You know, he always said you'd do great things, even back when you and that Bennett boy were running around town making eyes at each other." The mention of Ethan sent a familiar ache through Emma's chest. "That was a lifetime ago," she said softly, though the memories felt fresh as yesterday. After Mrs. Peterson left, Emma retreated to her office, once her father's, and sank into the worn leather chair. The morning sun streamed through the window, illuminating the framed pharmacy license on the wall. Emma Marie Foster, Pharm. D. She'd earned that degree while working part-time to help her ailing father, studying late into the night and driving 3 hours each way to attend classes. The local bank had been skeptical about lending money to a young black woman taking over a family business, but she'd proved them wrong. Foster's family pharmacy wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Her phone buzzed with a text from Noah. "You okay? You've got that look again?" Emma Sayhed. Noah knew her too well. He'd been the one to answer her phone last week when Ethan called, though she hadn't told him who it was. She'd recognized the number instantly when checking her call log later. 8 years hadn't erased those digits from her memory. "I'm fine," she texted back, "just thinking about Dad." It wasn't entirely a lie. Her father had been the one to hold her together after Ethan disappeared. "Sometimes people leave because they have to, not because they want to," he'd said, stroking her hair while she cried. "Don't let it harden your heart, baby girl." A knock on her office door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Sophie Adams, her newest employee, poked her head in. "Dr. Foster, there's someone from the Chamber of Commerce here about the Autumn Festival." Emma straightened in her chair. The festival was Rivertown's biggest event, and as a business owner and board member, she had responsibilities to fulfill. "I'll be right out." But before she could stand, Sophie added, "Oh, and have you heard? They're bringing in some big-shot CEO as the keynote speaker this year. Supposed to be quite the catch. Young, successful, and single, according to Mrs. Adams at the diner. Something in Emma's stomach twisted. Rivertown rarely attracted high-profile speakers. Did they mention a name? Bennett something. He grew up here, apparently. The world stopped spinning for a moment. Emma gripped the edge of her desk, thankful she was already sitting down. "Ethan Bennett, Sophie's eyes widened. That's it. You know him? Know him? She'd loved him, had planned a future with him, had spent countless nights wondering what she'd done wrong to make him leave without a word. We went to school together, Emma managed, her voice steady, despite the chaos in her mind. It was a long time ago, after Sophie left. Emma pulled open her bottom desk drawer. Inside, beneath old paperwork and pharmacy journals, lay a small wooden box. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid, revealing a collection of memories she'd never been able to throw away: movie ticket stubs, a pressed flower from prom, and a photograph taken at Willow's Lake. In it, she was laughing at something Ethan had said, her dark curls wild in the summer breeze, her brown skin glowing in the sunset. Ethan was looking at her like she hung the moon, his arm around her waist, both of them young and invincible and in love. Why now? She whispered to the photograph. Why come back after all this time? Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Noah. Chamber meeting in 10. Don't forget. Right, she had a business to run, a community to serve, a legacy to protect. She couldn't let Ethan Bennett's impending return derail everything she'd built. Emma returned the box to its hiding place and stood, smoothing her dress with practiced composure. In the small bathroom adjacent to her office, she checked her reflection, adjusting her bun and reapplying her lipstick. The woman in the mirror looked confident, successful, unshakable. Only her eyes betrayed the storm brewing beneath the surface. As she walked through the pharmacy, greeting customers and checking displays, Emma felt like she was moving through a dream. 8 years of silence, and now this? First the phone call, then the announcement of his return. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. Outside, autumn painted Rivertown in shades of gold and crimson. The same trees that had witnessed their teenage romance now stood sentinel over their impending reunion. But she wasn't that star-eyed girl anymore, and he wasn't the boy who'd promised forever over milkshakes at Sally's Diner. The Chamber of Commerce building loomed ahead, its brick facade unchanged by time. Before entering, Emma took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. She had 3 weeks to prepare for Ethan Bennett's return to Rivertown, 3 weeks to fortify her heart against the boy who'd broken it, 3 weeks to convince herself that she was over him. But deep down, in a place she rarely acknowledged, Emma knew the truth. Some loves leave marks that time can't erase, and whether she was ready or not, Ethan Bennett was about to walk back into her life, bringing with him all the questions, pain, and unresolved feelings of 8 years ago. The real question was, would she let him walk away again? And you're sure about this? Liam Park, Ethan's CFO and closest friend, leaned against the conference room doorway. Going back to Rivertown seems risky, especially with the Spencer merger on the horizon. Ethan stared at his laptop screen where the Chamber of Commerce's invitation glowed mockingly. 2 weeks had passed since that ill-fated phone call, and now fate was forcing his hand. The merger's solid. What they want is a feel-good story about local boy makes good, gives back to his community. Right. Liam crossed his arms. And it has nothing to do with a certain pharmacy owner? Ethan's head snapped up. How did you? Please. Liam rolled his eyes. I had to do the background check on local businesses for the charitable initiative, Foster's Family Pharmacy. Owner Emma Marie Foster. I saw how you looked when that file crossed your desk. The memory made Ethan wince. Seeing Emma's professional headshot, her dark skin radiant, her curls elegantly styled, her smile confident but reserved, had knocked the wind out of him. She'd grown from beautiful to stunning, success evident in every line of her face. The initiative is perfect for a place like Rivertown, Ethan said, deflecting. Small businesses are struggling everywhere. We can make a real difference. Sure. And if that difference happens to impress a certain someone. Enough, Liam. Ethan's tone carried a warning. This is business. Liam held up his hands in surrender. Just remember, you can't buy forgiveness. Trust me. I tried with my ex-wife. After Liam left, Ethan pulled up the pharmacy's website. The homepage featured a photo of Emma with an elderly customer, both laughing at something outside the frame. Her father's portrait hung prominently on the wall behind them, a detail that made his chest tighten. He remembered Mr. Foster's warm smile, the way he'd welcomed Ethan into their home, despite being a white boy from the wrong side of town dating his only daughter. You've got spirit, son, Mr. C. Foster had said once while Ethan helped inventory the pharmacy. But spirit without direction is just wind. Now, looking at the success Emma had built, Ethan wondered if he'd found that direction too late. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Bennett, your 3 o'clock is here. The venue scout from Rivertown. Send her in. Aria Brooks bustled through the door, her tablet already in hand. Mr. Bennett, Thank you for seeing me. I've scouted several locations for your keynote speech, but the town hall seems most appropriate. It's where you gave your valedictorian address." The mention of that day hit him like a physical blow. Emma had been in the front row, beaming with pride. They'd planned to frame his speech alongside her acceptance letter to pharmacy school. Another dream lost to his family's hasty departure. "The town hall's fine," he managed. "What else?" "Well, the festival committee is thrilled about your charitable initiative, 10 grants of $50,000 each for local businesses. It's generated quite a buzz." Aria's fingers flew across her tablet. "They've scheduled a meet and greet with the applicants the day before your speech. The pharmacy board has been especially vocal about." "The pharmacy board?" "Yes. Dr. Foster sits on it. She's quite influential in the community, actually." Aria hesitated. She suggested some modifications to the grant criteria. Her insights about the unique challenges facing Rivertown's businesses are quite valuable. Of course they were. Emma had always seen what others missed. "Send me her suggestions," Ethan said, keeping his voice neutral. "Anything else? Just your accommodation details. The Riverside Inn is our finest hotel, but some board members suggested you might prefer staying at your old." "The hotel is fine." The thought of seeing his childhood home, now owned by strangers, was too much. After Aria left, Ethan loosened his tie and walked to the windows. Boston's skyline stretched before him, a testament to how far he'd come from that broken teenager, but success felt hollow knowing he'd achieved it by running away. His phone chimed with an email. Emma's grant criteria suggestions, forwarded by Aria. Her writing style was precise, passionate, and thoroughly professional. She'd identified gaps in the original proposal that even his top analysts had missed. Reading between the lines, Ethan saw what she was really doing, protecting the smaller businesses, the ones that might get overlooked in favor of flashier proposals, just like her father would have done. The realization made him ache with something deeper than regret. In those carefully worded suggestions, he saw the woman she'd become, brilliant, compassionate, and fiercely protective of her community. Everything he'd known she would be, everything he'd lost the right to admire up close. His desk phone rang. "Liam again. The board wants to know if you're planning to announce the tech center expansion during your speech." "No." Ethan watched a plane cut through the autumn sky. "This isn't about business? Then what is it about?" "Redemption," he said softly. "Or at least facing what I did." Liam was quiet for a moment. "Just be careful, Matt. You can't undo the past." "No," Ethan agreed, "but maybe I can explain it." After hanging up, he pulled up the festival schedule on his laptop. 3 days of events culminating in his keynote speech. Somewhere in those 72 hours, he would see her, speak to her, try to explain why he disappeared without a word, why he'd let her believe he'd abandoned her by choice. But would she listen? The Emma he'd glimpsed through professional photographs and carefully worded emails was a far cry from the carefree girl who'd shared his dreams. This Emma had built her own success, earned her community's respect, carried on her father's legacy. What right did he have to disrupt her life again? His eyes fell on the small photo, still hidden in his desk drawer, 2 teenagers in love, unaware of how quickly happiness could shatter. He'd spent 8 years building walls around that memory, protecting himself from the pain of what he'd lost. Now those walls were about to crumble. The intercom buzzed one final time. "Mr. Bennett, your car's ready for the airport." Ethan gathered his things, each movement deliberate. The board would think he was flying out for another merger meeting. Only Liam knew he was heading to Rivertown early, desperate to walk those familiar streets before the spotlight found him. In his private elevator, Ethan caught his reflection in the polished doors. He'd crafted this version of himself carefully successful, confident, untouchable. But in less than 2 hours, he'd be standing on the same ground where he'd first held Emma's hand, first kissed her beneath the autumn stars, first whispered, "I love you," and meant it with every fiber of his being. The doors opened to the parking garage where his driver waited. "Where to, Mr. Bennett?" Ethan took a deep breath. "Logan Airport, Terminal Chi." As the car pulled away from his empire of glass and steel, Ethan closed his eyes. In his mind, he could already smell the crisp autumn air of Rivertown, hear the crunch of leaves beneath his feet, feel the weight of 8 years of silence pressing down on his shoulders. He was going home. But home had never been about a place. Home was a pair of bright brown eyes and a laugh that could light up the darkest night. Home was the girl he'd left behind, the woman she'd become, and all the words he'd never said. The question was, would she let him say them now? The autumn wind whipped around Emma as she locked up the pharmacy, her white coat replaced by a deep purple sweater that complemented her dark skin. Wednesday nights were usually quiet in Rivertown, perfect for catching up on paperwork after hours. But tonight something felt different. The air hummed with possibility. Like the moment before a storm breaks, You sure you don't want company? Noah called from his car. We could order from Lee's, go over those grant applications together. Emma smiled, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. I'm fine. Besides, don't you have a date with that new teacher? Cancelled. She got caught up in festival preparations. He hesitated. You know he's supposed to arrive tomorrow. She didn't need to ask who he was. The whole town had been buzzing about Ethan Bennett's early arrival, hence the paperwork, she said lightly. Better busy than wondering. Noah's expression softened. Call if you need anything. Always do. As Noah's taillights disappeared around the corner, Emma started her usual evening walk. The stars were just beginning to peek through the twilight, and the maple trees along Main Street blazed orange and red in the fading light. Her heels clicked against the sidewalk, a steady rhythm that usually calmed her thoughts. Not tonight. She'd barely slept since learning about Ethan's return. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him not the polished CEO from magazine covers, but the boy who'd held her hand through her mother's funeral, who'd sworn they'd face everything together. Lost in thought, she almost missed the figure standing in front of Sally's diner. Almost, but some memories are carved into bone, and she knew that silhouette like she knew her own reflection. Ethan Bennett stood motionless, staring up at the neon sign that hadn't changed in 8 years. His tailored coat couldn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. Emma's feet stopped moving before her brain could tell them to run. For a heartbeat that felt like forever, she just watched him, this stranger who wore her first love's face. Then he turned. Their eyes met across 20 feet of autumn air and 8 years of silence. Ethan's face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions: shock, longing, fear, hope, before settling into something raw and unguarded that made her heart stutter. Emma. He breathed her name, a prayer and a confession. She gripped her bag tighter, anchoring herself to reality. You're early. He took a step toward her, then seemed to think better of it. I needed to. I wanted to see the diner, or just checking if everything's still quaint enough for your keynote speech. The bitterness in her tone made him flinch. Good. Let him feel a fraction of what she'd felt, watching him vanish without a word. You look beautiful, he said softly. I mean, successful. Happy. I am. She lifted her chin. No thanks to you. A muscle ticked in his jaw. Emma. I don't. She held up a hand. Whatever explanation you've rehearsed, whatever corporate speech you've prepared, save it for the festival. I have work to do. She moved to walk past him, but his voice stopped her. Your father's portrait in the pharmacy. He'd be proud. The words hit like a physical blow. Emma spun to face him, 8 years of hurt crystallizing into anger. You don't get to talk about my father. You don't get to walk back into town playing successful prodigal son and act like you know anything about what we went through, what I went through. I saw the obituary, he said quietly. 3 years ago, I wanted to come. But I thought what? That showing up at his funeral would make up for disappearing. For letting me think I'd done something wrong? For making me question every moment we shared? Ethan took a step closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive and unfamiliar. You never did anything wrong. I was the coward. I was the one who... The diner's door chimed, startling them both. Old Mrs. Sally herself stepped out, her eyes widening at the tableau before her. Well, bless my soul, she breathed. Ethan Bennett and Emma Foster together again, just like old times. Except it wasn't. The teenagers who shared milkshakes and dreams at her counter were gone, replaced by strangers wearing their faces. Good evening, Mrs. Sally, Emma managed, grateful for the interruption. I was just heading home. Oh, but surely you two want to catch up. I could whip up those chocolate malts you used to love. Another time, Emma cut in. Mr. Bennett probably has meetings to prepare for. She didn't wait for his response, just turned and walked away, her heels striking the pavement like punctuation marks. Behind her, she heard Mrs. Sally's concerned murmur and Ethan's low reply. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The walk home passed in a blur. Inside her apartment above the pharmacy, Emma leaned against the door, finally letting out the breath she'd been holding. Her hands shook as she hung up her bag and kicked off her heels. Her phone buzzed. A text from Noah. You okay? Mrs. Sally called. Of course she had. In Rivertown, news traveled faster than thought. By morning, everyone would know about their encounter. I'm fine, she typed back. Just tired. She moved to her kitchen window, the one that overlooked Main Street. From here, she could see Sally's neon sign glowing in the distance. Ethan was gone, but the weight of his presence lingered like smoke in the air. He'd wanted to come to her father's funeral. The thought made her chest ache. Where was that concern when her father was sick? When she was working double shifts and studying for her pharmacy license? When she needed him most? Her reflection in the window caught her eye. The woman staring back looked composed, professional, unshakable. But underneath that carefully constructed facade, her 8-year-old heart was screaming. The grant application sat untouched on her coffee table, mocking her earlier plans for a productive evening. Instead, she found herself opening the bottom drawer of her desk, pulling out the wooden box of memories she'd promised herself she wouldn't touch. The photograph from Willow's Lake seemed to glow in the lamplight. 2 teenagers in love, his arms around her waist, her dark curls wild in the summer breeze. She traced his younger face with a trembling finger. What had happened to that boy? What wounds had turned him into the man who stood outside Sally's, looking at her like she was both salvation and judgment? Her phone buzzed again. An email from the Chamber of Commerce. Tomorrow's grant committee meeting had been moved up. Ethan would be there. Emma closed the box with a decisive click. She couldn't avoid him forever, but she could face him on her terms in the pharmacy, in meetings. She was Dr. Foster, respected business owner and community leader. That woman didn't need Ethan Bennett's explanations or approval, but as she got ready for bed, her fingers brushed the small scar on her palm, a matching set to one he carried. Blood sisters and brothers, they'd called themselves that summer night, swearing that nothing would ever come between them. Life, it seemed, had other plans. Tomorrow she would face him across a conference table, discussing business proposals and community initiatives. Tonight, she allowed herself one moment of weakness, one tear for the girl who'd believed in forever. Just one. After all, she had grant applications to review. The Chamber of Commerce conference room felt impossibly small. Emma sat at the long oak table, her laptop open before her, hyper-aware of Ethan's presence at the opposite end. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly mortgage payment. But his tie was slightly crooked, a detail that bothered her more than it should. As you can see, Aria Brooks gestured to the projected spreadsheet. We've received 38 grant applications. Mr. Bennett's initiative will fund 10 of them at $50,000 each. Emma forced herself to focus on the numbers instead of the way Ethan's fingers drummed silently against the table, a nervous habit he'd apparently never outgrown. She'd arrived early, claiming her usual seat beside George Larson, the hardware store owner. But she'd felt Ethan's eyes on her the moment he walked in, carrying that quiet intensity that had always made her feel like they were the only 2 people in any room. Dr. Foster, Aria turned to her. You had some concerns about the selection criteria? Emma straightened, slipping into her professional persona-like armor. Yes, the current metrics favor businesses with the highest growth potential, which could disadvantage established community pillars that serve our most vulnerable populations, such as Peterson's medical supply store. Ethan's voice was neutral, controlled. She met his gaze steadily. For example, they've been providing essential equipment to our elderly and disabled residents for 30 years, often at reduced costs. Their profit margins are slim, but their community impact is immeasurable. An excellent point, George chimed in. We need to consider social value, not just financial returns. Ethan nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. What would you suggest as alternative criteria? A balanced scorecard approach. Emma pulled up a document she'd prepared, evaluating not just financial metrics but also community engagement, historical significance, and service to underserved populations. As she walked the committee through her proposal, she felt a familiar energy building, the same spark that had always flown between them during debate club. Ethan asked precise and intelligent questions that both challenged and enhanced her ideas. For a moment, she could almost forget the weight of their shared history. Almost. This is impressive work, Dr. Foster, Ethan said finally. The formal title felt wrong in his mouth, like a stranger trying to speak a familiar language. I'd like to incorporate these modifications into the final selection process. A murmur of approval went around the table. Aria beamed. Wonderful. Now, about the applicant interviews. I can handle those, Ethan offered. Actually, George interrupted, our bylaws require a local board member to participate. Dr. Foster has the most experience with our business community. Emma's heart skipped. 3 days of interviews with Ethan in close quarters? I'm happy to assist, she heard herself say, her voice betraying none of her inner turmoil. My schedule is flexible next week. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of logistics and timelines. Emma took meticulous notes, grateful for any excuse to avoid Ethan's gaze. But when Aria called for a 15-minute break, she knew escape was impossible. Sure enough, his shadow fell across her laptop. Can we talk? We are talking. She kept her eyes on the screen. Your modified criteria look promising. I can email you a detailed breakdown of Emma, just her name, soft and pleading. But it held 8 years of unspoken words. She finally looked up. The conference room had emptied, leaving them alone with their ghosts. Ethan's tie was still crooked, and her fingers itched to straighten it. a muscle memory she thought she'd buried. "You're doing amazing work here," he said quietly. "The pharmacy, these initiatives, your father would be—" "Don't." She stood abruptly, needing the physical distance. "We're colleagues for this project. Nothing more. Let's keep it professional." A flash of pain crossed his face. "Is that what you want?" "What I want," she laughed. A sharp, brittle sound. "What I wanted was a goodbye. What I wanted was a reason, an explanation, anything besides 8 years of silence. What I wanted." She cut herself off, forcing her voice back to professional neutrality. "What I want now is to help my community. Nothing more. And if I want to explain?" He took a step closer. "If I want to tell you why I left, why I couldn't—" The door opened, and Arya bustled back in with fresh coffee. Emma stepped away from Ethan as if burned, gathering her things with trembling hands. "Everything okay?" Arya looked between them, concern evident in her expression. "Fine," Emma said briskly. "Mr. Bennett and I were just discussing interview schedules. I'll have my availability sent over this afternoon." She walked out without looking back, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors with military precision. But in the elevator, alone with her reflection in the polished doors, she allowed herself one shaky breath. The pharmacy was busy when she returned, giving her a legitimate excuse to dive into work. She counted prescriptions, advised patients, and reviewed inventory with mechanical efficiency, all while trying not to think about how Ethan's cologne had smelled exactly the same as it had 8 years ago. So, Noah appeared at her elbow as she was restocking the diabetic supplies. How bad was it? Fine. She focused on arranging the glucose meters with unnecessary precision. Completely professional. Right. He leaned against the shelf. "That's why you've been organizing the same display for 20 minutes. Emma sighed, finally meeting his knowing gaze. "He wants to explain, and you don't want to hear it? I don't know what I want." She moved to the next shelf, needing the motion. "He's not the same person, Noah. Neither am I. Maybe it's better to just keep our distance. Focus on the grants. Maybe—" Noah watched her carefully. "Or maybe you're scared that his explanation will make sense, that you'll understand why he left, and then you'll have to deal with forgiving him." "I have patience waiting," she said shortly, turning away from his too perceptive eyes. But later, alone in her office, his words haunted her. The grant applications lay spread across her desk, Ethan's signature bold at the bottom of each form. His handwriting hadn't changed still, that same confident slant that used to fill the margins of her notebooks with jokes and drawings and promises of forever. Her phone buzzed with an email from Arya, the interview schedule for next week. 3 days, 10 interviews each day, 30 opportunities for the professional facade to crack, for old wounds to bleed through careful bandages. Through her office window, she could see the sun setting behind the town hall, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Somewhere in Rivertown, Ethan was probably preparing for tomorrow's interviews, maybe looking at the same sunset and remembering the same moments. A knock at her door startled her from her reverie. Sophie poked her head in. "Dr. Foster, there's a delivery for you." A small package sat on the counter, wrapped in brown paper with no return address. Inside, Emma found a single chocolate malt from Sally's, still cold, with a note in familiar handwriting. "Some things don't change. The rest let me explain." "Please." Emma stared at the malt for a long moment, remembering countless afternoons sharing one with 2 straws, planning futures that never came to pass. Finally, she picked up her phone and typed out a response to the interview schedule. Schedule confirmed. Professional boundaries to be maintained. She hit send before she could change her mind, then dropped the untouched malt in the break-room fridge. Tomorrow, she would face Ethan Bennett across an interview table, Dr. Foster interviewing Mr. Bennett, 2 professionals doing their jobs. But tonight, alone in her office with the setting sun and rising memories, Emma Foster allowed herself to wonder what explanation could possibly heal 8 years of silence. The first interview was scheduled for 9 o'clock sharp. Emma arrived at the Chamber's conference room at 8:30, hoping to settle her nerves before Ethan appeared. Instead, she found him already there, his suit jacket draped over a chair, sleeves rolled up as he arranged papers into neat stacks. "You're early," she said, stopping in the doorway. He looked up, and for a moment, she glimpsed vulnerability beneath his CEO polish. Old habits. Remember debate prep? She did. They'd always arrived early, trading arguments and stealing kisses before the rest of the team showed up. The memory felt like a punch to the gut. "The first applicant is Peterson Medical Supply," she said briskly, setting her laptop on the table far enough away to maintain professional distance, close enough to review applications together. "I reviewed your notes on their community impact." He slid a folder toward her. "Impressive research. I like to be thorough." She opened her laptop, determinedly not noticing how his cologne mixed with coffee in the morning air. Mrs. Peterson raised her prices only once in 30 years, even when suppliers doubled their costs, and absorbed the losses herself. His tone held genuine interest. She remembers every customer's name, their children's names, their struggles. Emma looked up, meeting his eyes. Not everything valuable shows up on a balance sheet. Something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe, or regret. Before he could respond, Arya poked her head in. First applicants here. Ready to start? The morning passed in a parade of familiar faces. Mrs. Peterson dabbing at tears as she described helping families afford medical equipment. Mr. Lee from the restaurant whose free meal program had fed countless children during school breaks. Each interview lasted an hour, with Ethan asking incisive questions about financials, while Emma probed their community involvement. They worked well together, too well. Their questions complemented each other perfectly, as if they'd been conducting interviews side by side for years instead of days. Every now and then, their eyes would meet over a particularly good answer, sharing silent approval before remembering themselves and looking away. During their lunch break, Arya insisted on ordering sandwiches for everyone. You two keep working. Such amazing chemistry, I mean. Synergy. Professional synergy. Alone again. They ate in awkward silence, until Ethan spoke. The malt yesterday I shouldn't have. It's fine. Emma focused on her sandwich. Sophie probably enjoyed it. You didn't drink it. Professional boundaries, remember? He sat down his sandwich. Emma. The next interview's in 10 minutes. She stood, gathering the morning's papers. Oh, we should review Peterson's numbers again. Right. His voice turned crisp, professional. The depreciation on their equipment is concerning. They dove back into work, discussing profit margins and community impact with careful formality. But when the afternoon applicants began arriving, something had shifted. The easy rhythm of the morning was gone, replaced by a tension that crackled like static electricity. During the hardware store's interview, their hands brushed, reaching for the same document. Emma jerked back as if burned, knocking over her water glass. As she mopped up the spill, she felt Ethan's eyes on her, heavy with unspoken words. The final interview of the day was with Sally's diner. Mrs. Sally herself settled into the chair across from them, her wise eyes taking in their careful distance. Well, she said, smoothing her skirt, isn't this something? Little Ethan Bennett and Emma Foster sitting on the same side of the table. Mrs. Sally. Emma kept her tone professional. Please tell us about your plans for the grant money. The elderly woman's eyes twinkled. First time I saw you two together, you were sharing a malt at my counter. You couldn't have been more than 16. Even then, I thought. The grant application, Ethan interrupted gently. We'd love to hear about your expansion plans. Mrs. Sally sighed but complied, detailing her dreams of modernizing the kitchen while preserving the diner's vintage charm. As she spoke, Emma felt the weight of memories pressing down countless afternoons doing homework in their favorite booth, Ethan's arm around her shoulders as they shared fries and dreams, and of course, Mrs. Sally concluded, we'd keep the original counter where you two had your first kiss. Emma's pen slipped, drawing a jagged line across her notes. Ethan's sharp intake of breath was the only indication he'd been affected. Thank you, Mrs. Sally, he said smoothly. We'll review your application carefully. After she left, silence fell like a heavy curtain. Emma began gathering her things, desperate to escape the memories that seemed to fill every molecule of air between them. 7 interviews tomorrow, Ethan said finally. Same time? Yes. She kept her eyes on her laptop screen. I'll have the morning analysis ready by 8:30. Emma, his voice softened. About what, Mrs. Sally said. Don't. She looked up then, meeting his gaze. Please. I can't do this job if we keep remembering. He studied her face for a long moment. What if I don't want to forget? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and pain. Emma's phone buzzed a text from Noah, asking about dinner, giving her an excuse to look away. I'll see you tomorrow, Mr. Bennett. She walked out quickly, her heels striking a rapid rhythm against the hardwood floors. Outside, the autumn air was crisp and clean, helping to clear her head. But as she walked back to the pharmacy, every step felt weighted with the past the counter where they'd shared their first kiss, the booth where they'd planned their futures, the street corner where he'd first told her he loved her, rain soaking them both as they laughed and held each other close. Inside the pharmacy, she threw herself into work, double-checking prescriptions and updating inventory with fierce concentration. But when she finally retreated to her office, she found a small package on her desk. Inside was a single rose and a note. Some memories deserve to be kept, even the painful ones. Emma stared at the rose for a long moment before dropping it in her desk drawer, right next to the photograph she couldn't bring herself to throw away. Tomorrow they would do it all again, Sit close but not too close. Work together but not too well. Pretend that every accidental touch and shared glance didn't shake the foundations of their carefully constructed walls. As she drove home that evening, she caught sight of Ethan leaving the Riverside Inn. His tie loosened, looking as exhausted as she felt. For a moment, their eyes met across the street, and 8 years of silence seemed to stretch and bend like taffy. Then the light changed, and she drove on, leaving him in her rearview mirror. But his question echoed in her mind. What if I don't want to forget? The real question, she realized as she climbed the stairs to her apartment, was simpler and infinitely more terrifying. What if she didn't want to forget either? The second day of interviews started with a crisis. Emma arrived at the chamber to find Arya pacing outside the conference room, her tablet clutched to her chest. Dr. Foster, thank goodness. The Larson Hardware interview needs to be rescheduled. Their basement flooded overnight burst pipe. Mr. Bennett is already there at the hardware store. Emma's heart skipped. The same hardware store where Ethan had worked summers during high school, where he'd taught her to mix paint colors while stealing quick kisses behind the shelves. He insisted on seeing the damage himself. Something about structural integrity. Arya checked her tablet. We have a 2-hour gap now. Maybe you could. I'll head over. The words were out before she could stop them. Those old buildings share foundation walls. If Larson's has water damage, the pharmacy could be at risk. Ethan's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him in the doorway, his pristine suit dusty and stained. It's bad, Emma. The whole foundation's compromised. The old nickname slipped out so naturally that neither of them acknowledged it. How bad? Come see. The walk to Larson Hardware took less than 5 minutes, but it felt like crossing years. Ethan matched his stride to hers, close enough that their arms almost brushed. George's insurance won't cover it, he said quietly. Pre-existing condition clause. Of course not. Emma's jaw tightened. She'd fought similar battles with her father's medical insurance. How much to fix it? More than the grant would cover. He held the door for her, a gesture so familiar it hurt. But I have an idea. The basement was a mess of muddy water and exposed pipes. George Larson stood amid the chaos, looking older than his 60 years. His face brightened slightly when he saw Emma. Doc, your father used to say these old buildings would outlive us all. They will, she said firmly. We'll figure something out. Ethan moved through the space with surprising confidence, examining walls and support beams. The damage extends under the shared wall. We need to check your basement too. Emma's stomach dropped. The pharmacy's basement housed their overflow inventory and temperature-controlled storage. If water had reached their foundation, I'll get my keys. The walk to Foster's family pharmacy was silent but charged. Noah looked up in surprise as they entered. Everything okay? Building check, Emma said shortly, leading Ethan to the basement door. The familiar scent of medicine and history enveloped them as they descended the stairs. Ethan pulled out a flashlight, its beam cutting through the dim light. Your father kept everything organized by color code. Red for heart medication, blue for... He paused, flashlight beam wavering. You remember that? I remember everything. The words hung heavy in the cool air. Emma busied herself checking the far wall, trying to ignore how the confined space seemed to magnify his presence. Here. His voice was tight. Water damage along the southeast corner. Recent. She moved closer to look, forgetting their careful distance until she felt his breath on her neck. The flashlight beam illuminated a spreading water stain on the wall right where they'd once carved their initials during a stolen moment between inventory shifts. Their eyes met in the dim light, and suddenly they were 18 again, full of dreams and promises and unstoppable love. Emma, he breathed her name, a prayer in the darkness. Don't but. She didn't step away. We need to talk about what happened 8 years ago. Too late. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. The words echoed off the stone walls. You chose to leave without a word. Chose to let me think I meant nothing. Chose 8 years of silence. My father lost everything. His composure cracked. The business, the house, his reputation. He was drinking himself to death. We had creditors threatening to press charges. And you couldn't tell me this? Couldn't trust me to understand? You had just lost your mother. You were about to start pharmacy school. I couldn't. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so achingly familiar. I couldn't ask you to carry my family's shame too. So you made the choice for me. Anger and hurt twisted in her chest. Decided I was too weak to handle it? No. I was trying to protect. I didn't need protection. Her voice broke. I needed you. When Mom died, when Dad got sick, when everything was falling apart, I needed my best friend, my partner, the boy who promised forever. The flashlight beam trembled, casting dancing shadows on the wall. Ethan stepped closer, close enough that she could see the pain etched in his features. I read about your father's passing. he said softly. About how you finished pharmacy school while running the business. How you fought the bank to keep this place open. You're the strongest person I've ever known. Emma Foster. Don't. Tears burned behind her eyes. Don't act like you know me now. But I do. His voice was gentle. I followed every news article, every business filing. I watched you build this place into something amazing. Watched you become the woman I always knew you could be, while hiding in your glass tower in Boston. Bitterness crept into her tone. How noble of you to admire from afar. I was a coward. He let out a shaky breath. Running away was easier than facing what I'd done, than seeing the pain I'd caused. By the time I found my courage, you'd moved on. She laughed, a hollow sound. Is that what you thought? When you called, when a man answered my phone, understanding dawned in his eyes. Noah. That was Noah? My best friend. The one who stayed. She straightened her shoulders. The foundation damage. What's your idea? The abrupt return to business seemed to throw him. The grant. If we combine Larson's application with yours, create a joint proposal for structural repair, using my father's reputation to secure funding. Her tone could have frozen fire. No, Emma, please. Let me help fix this. Like you fixed things 8 years ago? She moved toward the stairs. I'll handle the repairs myself. Send the structural report to my office. Running away now? The quiet challenge in his voice stopped her. Isn't that what you're angry at me for? She turned slowly, fury and hurt warring in her chest. How dare you? You're right. I was a coward. He stepped closer, determination replacing guilt in his expression. I ran away because I thought I was protecting you, because I couldn't bear to see disappointment in your eyes, because loving you was the best thing I'd ever done, and I didn't know how to lose it gracefully. Stop. No. You deserve the truth. All of it. Another step. I've spent 8 years building an empire to prove I was worthy of you. 8 years wondering if you were happy, if you'd found someone better, if you ever thought about Mr. Bennett? Noah's voice carried down the stairs. The next applicant is waiting at the chamber. Reality crashed back like a wave. Emma brushed past Ethan, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Behind her, she heard him exhale slowly before following. The rest of the day passed in a blur of interviews and careful distances. But every time their eyes met across the conference table, she felt the weight of unfinished conversations pressing down like water against a crumbling foundation. That night, alone in her apartment, Emma pulled out the wooden box of memories. The photograph seemed to glow in the lamplight. 2 teenagers in love, unaware of how quickly happiness could crumble. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Some foundations are worth saving. Let me try. She didn't respond, but she didn't delete it either. The final day of interviews dawned cold and gray. Emma sat in her office before sunrise, reviewing structural reports that painted an increasingly grim picture. The water damage extended beyond Larson Hardware, threatening the entire block of historic buildings. Her father had always said these old structures were like family connected, dependent on each other's strength. A knock at her door startled her. Noah stood there, holding 2 coffee cups. You look like you haven't slept, he said, setting 1 cup in front of her. Thanks. She took a grateful sip, just going over the reports and avoiding thinking about what happened in the basement. Emma shot him a look. Nothing happened. Right. He settled into the chair across from her desk. That's why Ethan Bennett spent 3 hours in his hotel bar last night, staring at his phone like it held the secrets of the universe. Her hand tightened around the coffee cup. You were spying on him? Small town, remember? Mrs. Sally's nephew tends bar at the riverside. Said Ethan kept typing messages and deleting them, like the one he'd finally sent, still unread on her phone. Some foundations are worth saving. The structural damage is worse than we thought, she said, changing the subject. The whole block needs reinforcement. And, let me guess, he offered to help through the grant program. She stood, needing to move, using Dad's reputation to secure funding. Noah watched her pace. Would that be so terrible? Your father believed in community support, in neighbors helping neighbors. It's not about neighbors, it's about. She stopped, struggling to articulate the tangle of emotions in her chest. He can't just walk back into town and fix everything with money. No, Noah agreed quietly, but he's trying to fix what he can. Maybe that's a start. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed Aria, announcing that the morning's first interview was canceled. Another business had discovered water damage. This is getting serious, Noah said, reading over her shoulder. I need to talk to the city council. Emma gathered her files. These buildings are historic landmarks. They must have some emergency fund. They don't. Ethan's voice came from the doorway. He looked exhausted, his usual polish slightly frayed. I already checked. The city's budget is stretched thin after last year's storm damage. Emma straightened, painfully aware of Noah watching them both. The interviews are postponed? Ethan stepped into the office. The whole block needs inspection. Arya's rescheduling everyone. Noah stood smoothly. I'll go check our inventory. Make sure nothing's damaged. After he left, silence stretched between them like a living thing. Ethan looked around the office, his eyes lingering on her father's old desk nameplate. He gave me my first real job interview right here, he said softly. Made me wear a tie even though I was just stocking shelves. Teaching you professionalism. The memory rose unbidden Ethan in his father's too big tie, nervously adjusting it while her father asked serious questions about his 5-year plan. Emma, he met her eyes. About yesterday, we have bigger problems. She gestured to the reports. The damage is extensive, but fixable. He moved closer, pointing to specific sections. Look, the original foundations are solid stone. The water damage is mainly affecting newer additions. If we reinforce the connecting points, she found herself drawn into the technical discussion despite herself. Ethan's understanding of structural engineering surprised her until she remembered he'd rebuilt his life from the ground up. Of course, he'd learned about foundations. The cost would be astronomical, she said finally. Not if we coordinate repairs across all affected buildings. Economies of scale. His shoulder brushed hers as he reached for another report. I know some contractors in Boston who owe me favors. And what's the catch? He stepped back, hurt flashing across his face. No catch. Just trying to help. Like you helped by disappearing? The words escaped before she could stop them. I deserved that. He ran a hand through his hair. But this isn't about us, Emma. It's about saving these buildings. Your father's legacy. Don't. She turned away. You lost the right to talk about his legacy when I ran away like a coward? Yes, I know. His voice roughened. But he taught me more in one summer about integrity and community than my father did in 18 years. I owe him this, even if you hate me for it. I don't hate you. The admission cost her. I wish I did. It would be easier. Heavy footsteps on the stairs interrupted them. George Larson appeared, looking grim. City inspector's here, he announced. Says we might have to evacuate the whole block. Emma's world tilted. Evacuate? Close the pharmacy that had served Rivertown for 3 generations. No. Ethan's voice was firm. Get me 10 minutes with the inspector. George, call an emergency meeting of all affected business owners. We're handling this now. He pulled out his phone, already dialing. Liam? Remember that crew that renovated the Boston office? I need them in Rivertown today, whatever it costs. Emma watched him transform from the conflicted man of moments ago into the CEO who'd built an empire. He spoke with absolute authority, making arrangements and issuing directives with practiced ease. The pharmacy stays open, he said between calls. I promise. She wanted to reject his help, to prove she could handle this crisis alone, but her father's voice echoed in her memory. Pride makes a poor foundation. Baby girl. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is accept help when it's offered. Okay, she said quietly. Ethan paused mid-dial. Okay, save the buildings. She met his gaze steadily. But don't think this changes anything between us. Something like hope flickered in his eyes. Wouldn't dream of it. The next hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Ethan's crew arrived from Boston, bringing equipment and expertise. The city inspector was impressed by the rapid response and comprehensive repair plan. Business owners gathered in the pharmacy, spreading blueprints across the counter where customers usually collected prescriptions. Emma moved through it all in a daze, watching her world transform. Ethan seemed to be everywhere at once, consulting with engineers, reassuring owners, coordinating with city officials. He handled each crisis with calm efficiency, but his eyes found her constantly, checking if she was okay. Late that afternoon, she retreated to the basement to check the water levels. The space was crowded with equipment now, but she found the wall where they'd carved their initials. The old marks were barely visible in the dim light. They'll have to remove this section. Ethan's voice behind her was gentle. The stone's too compromised. She traced the faded letters with her finger. I know. We could save it. Cut out this piece. Some things aren't meant to be saved. She turned to face him. Sometimes you have to let go of the past to build something new. He studied her face in the shadows. And what if the past refuses to let go? Before she could answer, Noah called down the stairs. Emma, the news crew is here. They want to interview the business owners. Reality crashed back. They had a crisis to manage, a community to save. Personal revelations would have to wait. Coming, she moved toward the stairs but paused beside Ethan. Thank you for helping. Dad would have appreciated it. Emma, his voice stopped her. I know I can't fix the past, but maybe we can build something new, something stronger. She didn't answer, just climbed the stairs to face the waiting cameras. But his words echoed in her mind, mixing with memories of carved initials and broken promises and the possibility of fresh foundations. Some things weren't meant to be saved. But maybe, just maybe, they could be rebuilt. The news coverage brought more than just local attention. By morning, Rivertown's story had gone viral, historic small town rallying to save its business district. Led by a hometown success story and a determined black female pharmacist, Emma's phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. Another reporter, Noah announced, poking his head into her office. "This one's from the Boston Globe. Tell them what we told the others." Emma rubbed her temples. "All comments go through the Chamber of Commerce. They specifically asked about you and Ethan. Something about childhood sweethearts reunited to save their town." Emma's head snapped up. "What?" "Someone leaked your old yearbook photo. The one from senior prom." Noah handed her his phone, showing a Twitter thread that made her stomach drop. There they were, Ethan in his rented tuxedo, she in the midnight blue dress that had made her dark skin glow. They were laughing at something off camera, young and in love, and oblivious to the future rushing toward them. Perfect timing. Arya burst in, waving her tablet. "The human interest angle is exactly what we need for the fundraising campaign." "Fundraising campaign?" Emma's voice was dangerous. "Mr. Bennett's idea. He's matching all community donations to repair the buildings. The story is spreading fast, small businesses supporting each other, high school sweethearts reuniting. It's social media gold." "Absolutely not." Emma stood. "Where is he?" "Town hall. The contractor's needed." Emma was already moving, her heels striking the wooden floors like ammunition. The autumn air was crisp against her face as she crossed Main Street. Barely noticing the news van still parked along the curb, she found Ethan in the town hall's main chamber, surrounded by blueprints and contractors. He looked up when she entered, something softening in his expression. "We need to talk," she said flatly. "Now." He nodded to the contractors, who quickly made themselves scarce. "I'm guessing you saw the coverage. What are you playing at?" She thrust Noah's phone at him. "Using our past for publicity?" "I didn't leak the photo." He handed the phone back carefully. "But you have to admit it's getting attention, the kind of attention these buildings need. So, you're just going to exploit our history? Turn it into some feel-good story about young love and second chances?" "No." He stepped closer. "I'm trying to save something that matters to both of us. The publicity helps. But that's not why I'm here." "Then why are you here?" She met his gaze steadily. "Why now?" "Because I never stopped," he caught himself. "Because this town deserves better than what happened to my family. Better than watching its history crumble because of bureaucracy and budget cuts." "And the matching donation campaign? Another grand gesture to ease your conscience?" Pain flashed across his face. "You really think that's all this is?" "I don't know what to think anymore." The fight drained from her suddenly. 8 years of silence. Then you sweep back into town with your money and your connections and your "My what?" He moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. "Say it, Emma. What else am I bringing back?" "Your power to turn my world upside down," she whispered. The confession hung between them like smoke. Ethan's hand twitched at his side, as if fighting the urge to reach for her. "I saw your father's obituary," he said quietly. 3 years, 4 months, and 12 days ago. I booked a flight, got as far as the airport. What stopped you?" "Fear." His voice roughened. "Fear that you'd built this amazing life without me. That showing up would only hurt you more. That I'd lost the right to be there for you when I chose to leave 8 years before. You could have called, like I did last week." A bitter smile touched his lips. "When I heard a man answer your phone and ran away again?" Noah was just, "I know. Your best friend. The one who stayed." He ran a hand through his hair. "He's a good man, Emma. Better than I was. Different," she corrected softly. "Not better." Something changed in the air between them. A shift in pressure. A crack in carefully built walls. The door burst open, shattering the moment. Arya rushed in, tablet raised triumphantly. "You need to see this. Donations are pouring in. The story's being picked up nationally. We're trending." Emma stepped back, reality rushing in like cold water. "I should get back to the pharmacy." Ethan's voice stopped her. "The campaign? I'll shut it down if you want. Find another way." She studied him for a moment. This man who wore designer suits but still fidgeted with his tie when nervous, who commanded a corporate empire but looked at her like she still held all the power to hurt him. "No," she said finally. "The buildings need saving, just no more old photos." He nodded, relief evident in his expression. "Agreed. But Ethan," she paused at the door, "some memories are worth preserving, even if we can't go back to them." The words followed her back to the pharmacy, where more reporters waited. She handled their questions with professional courtesy, directing them to Arya for official statements, but her mind kept returning to the town hall, to almost confessions and the weight of shared history. That evening, after the last reporter left and the contractors packed up for the day, Emma found herself walking to Willow's Lake. The autumn sunset painted the water in shades of gold and crimson, a perfect mirror of her teenage dreams. "I thought I'd find you here." She didn't turn at Ethan's voice. "Following me now?" "No." He came to stand beside her. "Just remembering, you always came here to think. Some things don't change. And some things do." He looked out over the water. "The campaign's raised enough to start major repairs. With the matching funds, we can restore the whole block to code, maybe even better." "Thank you," she said quietly, "for helping, even if your methods are overwhelming." "Excessive? Pure CEO showboating?" A laugh escaped before she could stop it. "All of the above." He smiled, that real smile she remembered, not his polished corporate version. "I missed that sound. Ethan, I know." He held up his hands. "Professional boundaries, saving buildings. No complications." But complications hung in the air between them, heavy as the autumn mist rising from the lake. 8 years of silence were crumbling like old foundations, revealing truths they'd both buried. "Your father would be proud," Ethan said softly, "of everything you've built, everything you're fighting to preserve. He'd be proud of you too." The words surprised her. For coming back, for trying to make things right. Their eyes met in the fading light, and for a moment, all the years fell away. They were just Ethan and Emma again, standing by their lake, full of dreams and possibilities. Then her phone buzzed, Noah reminding her about tomorrow's pharmacy board meeting. Reality settled back like a familiar coat. "I should go," she said. "Emma," his voice was gentle, "the festival's in 3 days. Would you save a dance for me?" She thought of their prom photo circulating on social media, of young love and broken promises, and the possibility of new foundations. "Maybe," she said softly, and walked away before he could see the hope she couldn't quite hide behind her professional mask. The lake reflected the last light of day, turning everything to gold, including the tears she refused to let fall. 2 days before the festival, Rivertown transformed. Strings of lights appeared across Main Street, twinkling against the autumn twilight. The construction equipment that had dominated the block for days was carefully hidden behind festive bunting and fall decorations. Even the pharmacy's windows sparkled with tiny white lights woven through artificial maple leaves. Emma watched from her office as volunteers hung the festival banner across the street. "Rivertown Autumn Festival. Celebrating community," stretched in bold letters, with special guest speaker Ethan Bennett, in slightly smaller text below. "The grant announcements are confirmed for tomorrow night's opening ceremony," Aria said, consulting her ever-present tablet. 10 recipients, 5 minutes each for acceptance speeches. Then, Mr. Bennett's keynote, followed by the first dance of the festival. The first dance? Emma's stomach twisted. Remembering Ethan's request at the lake, she hadn't given him an answer yet. "Dr. Foster," Aria's voice pulled her back. "About the dance, there's been some social media speculation. People are hoping you and Mr. Bennett might recreate your prom photo." "Absolutely not." Emma turned from the window. "The grants are about community support, not personal history." "Of course." Aria looked disappointed. "It's just the stories really resonating. Local girl stays to preserve her family legacy. Local boy leaves to make his fortune. They reunite to save their hometown. Is there anything else about the ceremony I need to know?" Aria got the hint. "No, that's all." "Oh, except Mr. Bennett asked about the pharmacy's grant application. You never submitted one." "The pharmacy is fine." Emma's tone brooked no argument. "Other businesses need the support more." After Aria left, Emma tried to focus on inventory reports, but her eyes kept drifting to the construction barriers across the street, where Ethan's crews worked overtime to stabilize the buildings before the festival. He was out there somewhere, probably in another perfectly tailored suit, directing repairs with the same intensity he brought to everything. The door chimed downstairs, the distinctive double ring that meant someone had rushed in. Moments later, Sophie appeared in her doorway, slightly breathless. "Dr. Foster, you need to see this." Emma followed her downstairs to find a crowd gathering outside Larson Hardware. In the center, Ethan stood with George Larson, both men beaming at something being lifted from a truck. Her breath caught. It was the original Larson Hardware sign, the hand-painted one, that had hung above the store since 1947, carefully restored to its former glory. "Found a restoration specialist in Boston," Ethan was saying to the growing crowd. "She worked miracles with the original paint." George Larson wiped tears from his eyes as the sign was carefully mounted. "My grandfather painted that himself. We thought it was too damaged to save. Some things are worth saving." Ethan's eyes found Emma in the crowd. "No matter how long it takes." She looked away first, retreating to the pharmacy, but his words followed her, echoing off the walls that now hummed with the sound of power tools and progress. Noah appeared at her elbow as she checked prescriptions with mechanical precision. "You okay?" "Fine." She double-checked a dosage. Just busy. Right. He leaned against the counter. Nothing to do with the festival tomorrow. The dancing. The fact that every time Ethan Bennett looks at you, it's like watching a man dying of thirst stare at water. He's just trying to fix his guilty conscience. Is he? Noah's voice was gentle, because, from where I'm standing, it looks like he's trying to fix a lot more than that. Before she could respond, the door chimed again. Ethan entered, his suit dusty from construction, but his presence still commanding. Several customers whispered and pointed, phones appearing to snap discreet photos. Dr. Foster. His voice was professionally neutral. Could I have a moment? She followed him to a quiet corner, aware of the eyes watching them. Another publicity opportunity? Pain flashed across his face. Actually, it's about your grant application, or lack thereof. The pharmacy doesn't need. The basement wall is failing. He kept his voice low. The contractors found new damage this morning. Without immediate repairs, I'll handle it. Emma. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell sawdust and expensive cologne. Let me help, not for publicity or redemption or anything else. Just let me do this one thing. She looked up at him, this man who'd broken her heart and was now trying to save her world, piece by piece. Why? Because 8 years ago, I ran from my problems and left you to face yours alone. His voice roughened. Because your father gave me my first real job, my first taste of belonging somewhere. Because this place, these people, they're worth fighting for. The sincerity in his voice made her chest ache. Before she could respond, someone cleared their throat nearby. They turned to find Mrs. Sally watching them with knowing eyes. Sorry to interrupt, dears, but I thought you'd want to know they're playing your song at the diner. Emma's heart stopped. Through the open door, she could hear the faint strains of At Last drifting from Sally's ancient jukebox, the same song they danced to at prom, the same song that had played during their first kiss. Ethan's expression softened with recognition. Mrs. Sally just thought you'd want to know. The older woman smiled mysteriously and wandered away. The music floated between them, heavy with memories. Ethan's hand twitched at his side, and for a moment, Emma thought he might reach for her. Instead, he said softly, the grant application deadline is midnight. Just think about it. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He turned to leave but paused at the door. Emma. About tomorrow's dance. I'll think about that too. A smile touched his lips, small but real. Then he was gone, leaving her with the echo of their song and the weight of decisions to make. That night, alone in her apartment, Emma pulled out the grant application she'd filled out weeks ago but never submitted. The basement wall wasn't the only thing failing. The entire building needed work she couldn't afford on her own, no matter how much pride told her otherwise. Her father's voice seemed to whisper in her ear, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is accept help when it's offered. At 11:58 p.m., she sent the application. At 11:59 p.m., a text arrived from Ethan. Thank you for trusting me with this, even if it's just the building. She stared at the message for a long time, remembering dusty suits and restored signs, and the way he still looked at her like she hung the moon. Outside, the festival lights twinkled against the darkness, promising magic and possibility. Tomorrow she would watch him announce the grants, listen to his keynote speech, face the decision about their dance. Tomorrow she would have to acknowledge that the walls she'd built around her heart were crumbling like the foundations he was trying to save. But tonight, she allowed herself to remember the boy who'd loved her, the man who'd left, and the person he was trying to become. Remember prom nights and stolen kisses and promises made under autumn stars. Remember that some songs never really end. They just wait for the right moment to play again. The festival lights cast shadows on her ceiling, dancing like memories she couldn't quite forget. In less than 24 hours, she would have to decide, keep running from the past, or take a chance on building something new from the ruins of what they'd lost. The choice terrified her, but as she drifted off to sleep and, at last, played in her dreams, her heart made decisions her mind wasn't ready to face. The festival opening ceremony transformed the town square into a fairyland of twinkling lights and autumn colors. Maple leaves in shades of gold and crimson danced on the evening breeze as Emma stood before her mirror, adjusting the gold necklace her father had given her for graduation. Her reflection showed a woman she barely recognized, elegant in a deep burgundy dress that complemented her dark skin, her natural curls styled in a sophisticated updo. The woman in the mirror looked confident, successful, unshakable. Only her eyes betrayed the storm of emotions beneath the surface. A knock at her door revealed Noah, handsome in a dark suit. Ready? As I'll ever be. She grabbed her clutch, double-checking that her acceptance speech was inside. The grant recipients hadn't been announced yet, But Arya's knowing smile that morning had confirmed what Emma had suspected. The pharmacy's last-minute application had been accepted. The square was packed when they arrived. A stage had been set up in front of the town hall. Chairs arranged in neat rows before it. The restored Larson Hardware sign gleamed under the festival lights, a testament to what was possible when past and present worked together. Dr. Foster. Arya hurried over, tablet in hand, front row, next to the other grant recipients. Mr. Bennett specifically requested. I'm fine wherever, Emma interrupted, but allowed herself to be led to a seat in the center of the front row. From here, she'd have an unobstructed view of Ethan during his keynote speech. The thought made her stomach flutter. The mayor opened the ceremony with a speech about community spirit and resilience. Emma barely heard it, too aware of the empty seat beside her on the stage waiting for Ethan's entrance. Then he was there, climbing the steps with that quiet confidence she remembered from debate competitions. His suit was impeccable, but his tie was slightly crooked. Some habits never changed. Good evening, Rivertown, he began, his voice warm and sincere. 8 years ago, I left this town with nothing but regrets and broken promises. Today I return not just as a businessman, but as someone who finally understands what community really means. His eyes found hers in the crowd. Sometimes we have to leave home to appreciate its true value. Sometimes we have to lose something precious to understand its worth. Emma's heart thundered in her chest as he continued, describing the grant program and its goals. When he began announcing recipients, each name was accompanied by personal observations about their contribution to Rivertown's spirit. And finally, Ethan's voice softened. Our 10th recipient, Foster's Family Pharmacy, under the leadership of Dr. Emma Foster. It has been more than just a business. It's been a cornerstone of hope, healing, and community support for 3 generations. The crowd applauded as Emma rose, her legs steadier than she expected as she climbed the stage steps. Ethan held out the grant certificate, and their fingers brushed during the exchange. A photographer's flash captured the moment. Thank you, she said into the microphone, unfolding her prepared speech, but looking out at the faces of her community, Mrs. Peterson wiping tears, George Larson beaming proudly, Mrs. Sally nodding in approval. Different words came. My father used to say that a community is only as strong as the foundations we build together. Her voice carried across the hushed crowd. These past weeks have proven him right. When our buildings were threatened, we didn't just save structures, we reinforced the bonds between us. Sometimes, her eyes met Ethan's. Sometimes what seems broken can be rebuilt stronger than before. The applause was thunderous as she returned to her seat. She felt Ethan's gaze following her, heavy with unspoken words. His keynote speech was perfectly crafted, hitting all the right notes about small-town values and economic development. But under the polished phrases, Emma heard everything he wasn't saying about regret and redemption and second chances. Finally, the mayor returned to the stage, and now, as tradition demands, our guest of honor will open the dancing portion of our festival. Emma's breath caught. This was the moment, the dance she'd neither accepted nor declined. The crowd shifted expectantly, phones raised to capture whatever happened next. Ethan descended the stage steps slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. The opening notes of "At Last" filled the square. Of course it would be their song. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. He stopped before her chair and held out his hand. No words, no pressure, just an invitation in his eyes, and 8 years of silence waiting to be broken. Time seemed to freeze as Emma looked at his offered hand. In it, she saw everything: the boy who'd loved her, the man who'd left, the person trying to bridge that gap. Around them, the crowd held its collective breath. Slowly, giving her heart time to catch up with her actions, Emma placed her hand in his. The crowd's appreciative murmur faded as Ethan led her to the dance floor. His hand settled on her waist, familiar and foreign all at once. They began to move, and suddenly they were 18 again, swaying under prom lights, full of dreams and promises. Your tie is crooked, she whispered. Surprising them both, a soft laugh escaped him. Some things never change, and some things change too much. But she didn't pull away when he drew her slightly closer. I meant what I said. His voice was low, meant only for her, about understanding worth. Too late, Ethan. No, please, let me say this. His hand tightened on hers. I spent 8 years building an empire to prove I was worthy of you. But watching you these past weeks, your strength, your dedication to this community, I realized something. You never needed my success or my money or my grand gestures. You just needed me to stay. Tears burned behind her eyes. Why didn't you? Because I was young and stupid and thought I was protecting you. The words rushed out like a dam break because watching my father destroy everything made me believe I'd do the same to you. Because leaving seemed easier than risking your disappointment when everything fell apart. I wouldn't have been disappointed. Her voice cracked. I would have helped. We could have faced it together. I know that now. He pulled back slightly to meet her eyes. I know I can't undo the past 8 years. But Emma, if there's any chance. The music swelled around them. Etta James's voice singing about skies of blue and miracles, and other couples had joined the dance floor. But Emma barely noticed them. In Ethan's eyes, she saw every dream they'd shared, every promise they'd made, every possibility that still hung between them like autumn leaves in the wind. The song was ending. Soon they'd have to step apart, face the crowd, return to the reality they'd built in the wake of broken promises. But for now, in this moment, everything that had crumbled between them felt possible to rebuild. Ask me again, she whispered. His eyes widened with understanding. Emma Foster, can I have this dance? She smiled through tears. She refused to let fall. And the next one, the hope that blazed across his face, was brighter than all the festival lights combined. As the last notes of At Last faded into the autumn night, he pulled her closer. And this time, she didn't resist. Sometimes, the strongest foundations are built on the ruins of what we thought was lost forever. 3 months after the autumn festival, snow-blanketed Rivertown in pristine white. Emma stood in the pharmacy's basement, watching contractors install the final support beam. The wall where she and Ethan had carved their initials was gone, replaced by reinforced stone and steel stronger than before. But holding memories in its shadows, the final inspection scheduled for tomorrow, Ethan said from behind her. He'd loosened his tie after a day of meetings in Boston, but his eyes were bright with excitement. The whole block will be officially stable. Just in time for the holiday celebration, she turned to face him, still marveling at how natural it felt to have him here in her space, in her life. The past 3 months had been a careful dance of rebuilding not just buildings, but trust. They'd taken it slow after the festival coffee at Sally's, walks by Willow's Lake, quiet conversations about the years they'd lost. Ethan had split his time between Boston and Rivertown, running his company remotely while overseeing the restoration project. Each visit brought new revelations, new understanding, new foundations. The Boston office called again, he said carefully. They want an answer about the relocation. The elephant in the room. His board wanted him back full-time, managing the empire he'd built. The same choice that had torn them apart 8 years ago now loomed again. And what are you going to tell them? Instead of answering, he took her hand, leading her upstairs to the pharmacy's main floor. Noah was closing up, helping the last customers of the day. Actually, Ethan's voice carried through the space. I wanted to show you something first. He guided her to the front window, where the last rays of sunset painted Main Street in shades of gold and rose. The restored buildings stood proud against the winter sky, their historic facades preserved but strengthened. Holiday lights twinkled in every window, reflecting off the fresh snow. Look, he pointed to the building across the street, the old Adams place that had been empty for years. A sign in the window read, "Coming soon. Bennett Technologies, Rivertown Division." Emma's heart stuttered. Ethan, I told the board I'm staying. His voice was soft but certain. Opening a regional office here, bringing tech jobs to Rivertown, partnering with the community college for training programs. If that's okay with you. She turned to face him, seeing not just the successful CEO, but the boy who'd once promised her forever. You'd do that? Leave Boston? Boston was never home. He squeezed her hand. Just a place I ran to when I was too scared to face what I'd lost. But watching you these past months, your dedication to this town, to your father's legacy, I finally understood. Sometimes the biggest dreams are the ones that bring you back where you belong. Through the window, she could see Mrs. Sally putting up new curtains in her diner. George Larson was locking up his hardware store, the restored sign gleaming above. Mrs. Peterson waved as she walked past, carrying prescriptions Emma had filled that morning. Your father once told me something, Ethan continued. The summer I worked here, when I was worried about not being good enough for his daughter. A soft laugh escaped him. He said, Son, love isn't about being worthy. It's about being willing to grow, to learn, to build something that lasts. Tears pricked Emma's eyes. It sounded exactly like something her father would say. I wasn't willing then. Ethan's voice roughened. I was scared and proud, and thought running away would protect everyone. But now, he turned her to face him fully. Now I'm willing to build something real, something that lasts if you'll help me. Ethan Bennett, she said softly. Are you asking me to be your business partner? A smile touched his lips. Among other things, she looked around the pharmacy at the restored walls, the updated equipment paid for by the grant, the fresh paint that somehow made everything feel both new and comfortingly familiar. In the corner, her father's portrait watched over it all, his kind eyes seeming to twinkle with approval. "What about your company? You're bored? They'll adapt. I can run most things remotely. Fly to Boston when needed. But my life," he touched her face gently, "my heart belongs here, with you, always has." The last light of day streamed through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and clean, covering old tracks and making way for new ones. "You know," Emma said thoughtfully, "the building next door needs a tenant. Someone was talking about opening a coffee shop." "Interesting." His thumb brushed her cheek. "Good location. Right between the pharmacy and the tech office. Perfect for morning coffee runs, afternoon breaks, late-night planning sessions." They were closer now, drawn together like magnets finally freed from opposing poles. Her hands found his crooked tie, straightening it with practiced ease. "We'd have to be careful," she murmured. "Dating the competition. Technically," his eyes danced, "we'd be on the same block, practically neighbors, practically living in each other's pockets. I can think of worse things." He leaned closer, like 8 more years of silence. The kiss, when it came, felt like coming home, like every promise they'd made under autumn stars, every dream they'd whispered over shared milkshakes, every possibility that had waited through 8 years of silence for this moment to arrive. When they finally parted, Noah's slow applause made them both laugh. He stood by the door, grinning broadly. "About time," he said. "Mrs. Sally owes me $20. She thought it would take until New Year's." Emma buried her face in Ethan's chest, feeling his laughter rumble through her. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering Rivertown in a blanket of possibility. Tomorrow would bring the final inspections, the holiday preparations, the 1,000 small moments of building a life together. But tonight, in the pharmacy where their story had begun and began again, they held each other and watched the snow fall, knowing that some foundations are built not of stone and steel, but of forgiveness and second chances, and love strong enough to survive 8 years of silence. "So," Ethan whispered against her hair, "about that dance?" Emma smiled, remembering another question asked under festival lights. "This one, and the next one, and all the ones after that." As if on cue, music drifted from Sally's diner across the street, their song floating through the winter night like a blessing. "Sometimes the longest journeys lead us right back where we started, stronger for the distance traveled and ready, at last, to build something that lasts." And in Rivertown, where old buildings stood on new foundations and second chances bloomed like winter roses, 2 hearts that had never truly forgotten each other began to write their next chapter together,